I need to tell you something before you decide whether to trust me. I spent 3 months avoid a woman who lived one floor above me. Not because she did anything wrong, but because every time I saw her, my chest hinted like I was standing in front an open flame again. I am not proud of that. I am just being honest. If you ever crosses the street to avoid of memory, you understand why this story starts where it does.
My name is Mark Bennett. I'm 28. I own a small, tired two-story house outside Nashville with 3 rental units, and I work as an IT admin at a hospital during the day. At night I fix things. Railings. Leaky faucets. Old wiring I probably shouldn't touch anymore. 3 years ago I lost my fiancée in a fire. I tell people it was an accident. What I don't say out loud is that I still believe it was my fault. That's important. Hold on to that. 3 months ago, Olivia moved into the upstairs apartment. 41. Music teacher. Piano player. Quiet, polite, always paid rent on time. From day one, I learned her schedule so I wouldn't run into her. I checked the stairwell before leaving my apartment. I fixed a loose banister at midnight. I lived in my own building like a guest who didn't want to be noticed. You might think that's ridiculous. I thought so too until the morning she stopped me by the mailboxes. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse me of anything. She just stood there with a folder of sheet music pressed to her chest and said, "Why do you keep avoiding me, Mark? Did I do something wrong?" I wish I could tell you I handled that well. The truth is I froze. Because for half a second I didn't see a 41-year-old tenant. I saw Emily standing on these same stairs years ago, papers in her hands, waiting for me to answer a question that mattered more than I understood at the time. So I told Olivia the first true thing that came to my mind and none of the rest. I said, "Because you remind me of everything I lost." Then I stopped talking. I didn't explain about the fire, or the nights I wake up smelling smoke that isn't there, or how my life has been on autopilot ever since, measured in shifts, meals, and repairs. I just stood there, a grown man hiding behind silence. She could have gotten angry. Anyone would have. Instead, she looked at me for a long second and asked very softly, "What did you lose, Mark? A person, or yourself?" That question landed harder than the fire ever did. I didn't answer it. I made an excuse about the boiler and escaped into the utility room like a coward. I'm telling you this because that was my first real choice in a long time. Stay and speak or run and survive another quiet day. I chose the second. That night I thought the day was over. I was sitting on the stairs in the dark, counting the ways I've learned to keep breathing without living when I heard it. Piano. Soft. Careful. The exact melody I used when I proposed to Emily, back when I still believed plans were promises. My hands tightened on the railing until my knuckles went white. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. All I could think was one question, and it scared me more than the memory ever had. How does the woman upstairs know that song? I woke up with that melody still stuck in my ribs. Not in my head, my ribs. Like the song had moved in overnight and decided to rent space next to my heart without asking. I poured coffee, stared at my kitchen wall, and did the dumbest thing a grieving man can do. I hit play on an old video. Emily was on the screen laughing at something I'd said off camera. Her laugh filled my apartment for 2 seconds and then I killed the sound. I stood there breathing hard like I'd just run up the stairs instead of walking 10 feet. So here was my choice at sunrise. Go upstairs and ask Olivia how she knew that song, or keep doing what I've done for 3 years, act like silence is a safety system. I chose silence. At first. Over the next week Olivia and I slipped into a careful routine. We weren't friends. We weren't strangers either. We were 2 people sharing stairwell air. She left a note about a dripping faucet. It drips like it's counting time. I fixed it after work. The next morning there was a plastic container by my door with 2 homemade cookies inside. Nothing fancy. Just decent. And I noticed something else whether I wanted to or not. Every morning at 7:15, Olivia stepped outside with her phone and talked for about 10 minutes. Same spot near the porch column. Her voice never got loud but it got tight. One morning I was taking out trash and caught a few words through the screen door. "No, Greg. I'm not coming back." Then, "Stop saying it like that." After that, silence, the kind you can hear. I told myself it wasn't my business. That was choice number 2. Keep my world small or step 1 inch closer to somebody else's trouble. I kept it small. For about a day. That night a storm rolled in fast. Hard rain, thunder that made the whole place shudder. The power blinked twice and went out. The house went dark in that thick way that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the basement panel. Halfway down the stairs I saw Olivia in the hallway, holding a little camping lantern. Oversized sweater. Big glasses. Hair in a messy bun. No new tenant mask. Just a woman trying to act braver than she felt. "This is ridiculous," she said and laughed once, quick, nervous. "I'll get it back on," I told her. "I know," she said. "You're the guy who fixes everything." That line hit me wrong. Not because it was unkind. Because it was true and I didn't like being seen. I got most of the power back but her unit stayed dark. "I can wait," she said immediately, like asking for help was a habit she trained out of herself. "You don't have to," I said. "I'll check upstairs." In my life, upstairs isn't just a direction. It's a risk. It's stepping into someone else's space and letting your routine get fingerprints on it. Olivia opened her door and stepped aside. "Just for a minute," she said. "Until you make sure the wiring isn't, you know." She didn't say fire. She didn't have to. Her apartment smelled like tea and paper. Boxes lined one wall. Near the window sat a small upright piano with a cloth over it. She'd looped battery fairy lights along a shelf, and the warm glow made the place feel calmer than my own place ever did. I checked an outlet, tightened a screw, tested a switch. Normal work. The kind my hands understand. Olivia poured tea into two mismatched mugs and sat on the floor a few feet away. "About the mailboxes," she said. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put you on the spot." "You didn't," I said. "You asked a fair question." She nodded. "When someone avoids you, you start writing stories in your head." Mine weren't kind. My throat tightened. I could have told her the truth right then. "Emily, the fire. The smell that shows up in my nightmares like smoke has a key." Instead, I chose the familiar shelter. "I'm not great at people," I said. "Not lately." "That makes two of us," she said and reached for her folder. She flipped it open and there it was. The melody. The one I used when I proposed. The one she played last night like she'd stolen it from my memory. My hands went still. "Where did you get that?" Olivia's eyes widened. "I didn't know it was yours. I teach online. One of my students asked me to learn it. He said it was his daughter's favorite." Something cold moved through my chest. "Your student lives here?" "No," she said quickly. "Mr. Harlow. He's in town, not in this house. Older guy. Lonely. He talks about his daughter like she's in the next room." I stared at the notes. For once, the universe offered an explanation that wasn't cruel. Olivia watched me. "I'm sorry if I reopened something," she said. I wanted to ask a dozen questions. I also didn't want to hand my pain to a woman I'd spent months avoiding. So I picked a middle road. "It's not your fault," I said. "It's just a song with a history." She nodded like she understood. Then she showed me a photo on her phone, Chicago, a small studio, and one shot with a man in a suit beside her, his hand on her shoulder. Her smile looked practiced. "Greg," I said. Her face went distant. "Yeah." She took a breath. "He calls every morning. Says he wants me back to normal. And he says after 40, nobody notices you unless it's out of pity." That did something to me. Simple, stubborn anger. "He was wrong," I said. Olivia blinked. "You don't even know me." "I know what I've seen," I said. "You moved across states to start over. You teach people who think they're too old to learn. That's not pity." Her mouth opened, then closed. Like she didn't know what to do with respect that didn't come with a hook. Her lights flickered and steadied. Power was back. I stood up. "I should go," I said, because staying felt like stepping onto thin ice with your eyes open. Olivia nodded, but she didn't look relieved. I reached the doorway and then came the knock. Firm, confident, like whoever was out there had practiced being heard. Olivia's face drained of color. Another knock. A man's voice, smooth and sure. "Liv, we need to talk." And right there, with my hand on her doorknob, I felt the next choice forming, clear as thunder. Step back into my quiet life, or stay and find out what kind of trouble had her standing in the dark with her shoulders locked up like that. The knock didn't sound angry. That was the problem. Angry knocks are honest. This one was calm, confident, like whoever stood on the other side already assumed the door would open. I stayed where I was, hands still on the frame, close enough to feel the tension coming off Olivia like static. She didn't look at me right away. She looked at the door, then down at the floor, as if she were deciding which version of herself she needed to become to survive the next 5 minutes. "You don't have to stay," she said quietly. That was her giving me an exit. A clean one. I could have taken it. I should have. But I didn't. "It's my building," I said. If someone's causing trouble, I should know who it is. That was only half true. The other half was simpler and harder to admit. I didn't like the way her shoulders locked up when she heard his voice. She opened the door. The man standing there looked exactly like the kind of guy who's never had to knock twice in his life. Expensive coat. Perfect posture. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. He took one look at me and did a quick mental calculation, age, build, threat level. Then he smiled wider. You must be Mark, he said. Greg. He stuck out his hand like we were at a networking event instead of the doorstep of his ex-wife's new life. His grip was firm. Practiced. I was just leaving, Olivia said, but she didn't move. Greg turned to her, still smiling. We need to talk, Liv. This doesn't have to be dramatic. I watched her jaw tighten. I'd seen that look before, on patients in the hospital hallways when a doctor uses calm words to deliver bad news. You said everything you needed to say on the phone, she replied. You didn't listen, Greg said lightly. Then he glanced at me again. I hope we're not making you uncomfortable. There it was. The opening. The polite shove meant to remind me of my place. I felt the familiar pull to step back, to disappear into utility rooms and silence. That was my old move. The safe one. Instead, I heard myself say, she asked you to leave. Greg raised an eyebrow. And you are. The guy who owns the building, I said. And the guy standing here while you ignore her. For a second, something cold passed through his eyes. Then he laughed softly. I see, he said. You do realize she could be your teacher, right? The line landed exactly where he meant it to. I felt it. So did Olivia. She straightened. That's enough, Greg. He turned back to her, irritation slipping through the polish. I'm trying to help you. You're hiding out in a rental in Tennessee when you had a life in Chicago. I had your life, she said. And it almost erased me. Silence settled in the hallway. Greg looked at her like he was seeing resistance for the first time. Go, she said. Please. He held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded, sharp and controlled. We're not done, he said, and walked past me without another word. I listened to his footsteps fade down the stairs, my heart still pounding harder than the situation deserved. When the door closed, Olivia exhaled like she'd been underwater. I'm sorry you saw that, she said. You didn't do anything wrong, I replied. We stood there, not quite knowing what to do with the space he'd left behind. Then I said the thing I hadn't planned on saying. If he comes back unannounced, tell me. She looked surprised. You don't have to get involved. I know, I said. But I'm choosing to. That choice lingered with me longer than I expected. Over the next few days, the house felt different. Quieter but charged. I found myself listening for footsteps upstairs, wondering how Olivia was holding up. Then the second knock came, this one for me. A phone call first, actually. From my insurance company. The woman on the line used a careful tone, the kind people use when they're about to reopen a door you've spent years barricading. Mr. Bennett, she said, we're reviewing a prior fire claim associated with your property. My stomach dropped. That case was closed, I said. It was, she replied. But we've received new information suggesting there may have been unreported electrical modifications. I sat down hard on the stairs. The smell of smoke crept into my memory like it always did. Who reported that? I asked. I can't disclose that, she said. An inspector will be visiting the property this week. After the call ended, I stayed there, staring at nothing. 3 years I'd lived with the belief that my hands had caused the fire that killed Emily. 3 years of punishment I'd assigned myself without anyone asking me to. Now someone else was circling that same guilt, ready to make it official. That night I ran into Olivia in the hallway. She noticed my face right away. What happened? She asked. I told her. All of it. About the wiring I'd touched back then. About the insurance call. About the way guilt can rot quietly until it starts answering the phone for you. She listened without interrupting. They're looking for someone to blame, she said finally. And you're convenient. Maybe they're right, I said. The words tasted old and familiar. She shook her head. Maybe you've been punishing yourself long enough. We didn't solve anything that night. We just stood there, two people learning that the past doesn't stay buried just because you're tired of digging. The next afternoon, I stepped outside to clear my head and saw a man in a suit standing near the curb, holding a folder with my insurance company's logo on it. And across the street, leaning against his car like he owned the block, was Greg. Talking to him. Laughing. That's when it hit me. This wasn't coincidence. This was pressure. And I had another choice to make. Keep carrying my guilt alone, or finally fight back even if it meant dragging every painful truth into the light. The first thing I learned after the insurance call was this: fear doesn't shout. It settles in quietly and starts rearranging your days. I stopped sleeping through the night. I checked the breaker panel twice before leaving for work. I caught myself rereading old inspection reports like they might suddenly confess something I'd missed. If you've ever waited for a doctor to call back with test results, you know the feeling. You keep living but everything feels provisional. Like you're not allowed to plan past next week. The inspector showed up on a Wednesday afternoon. Polite, neutral, clipboard in hand. He asked questions in a voice that sounded practiced enough to stay calm no matter what answers he got. I walked him through the building, opening doors I'd closed in my own mind years ago. The basement. The wiring. The exact spot where the fire had started. Every step felt like a confession. When he left he said, "We'll be in touch." That sentence has ruined more evenings than any insult ever could. I stood in the driveway after he drove off, watching dust settle where his tires had been. That's when Olivia came outside. She didn't ask how it went. She just stood next to me, close enough that I could feel her presence without it demanding anything. "You don't have to go through this alone," she said. I almost laughed. Not because it was wrong. Because it scared me. Alone is a habit. It's predictable. It doesn't leave room for disappointment. Sharing the weight means risking someone else feeling it too. That was the choice sitting in front of me, clear as day: keep the burden contained or let it spill into someone else's life. "There's a music festival in the park tonight," Olivia said after a moment. "Nothing fancy. Just old rock covers. People who clap between songs." I shook my head. "I'm not in the mood." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm asking." She smiled just enough. "Come sit. You don't have to pretend to enjoy it." An hour later, I found myself on a bench under string lights, listening to a band play a song I half remembered from my dad's radio. Couples danced slowly. Some better than others. A few people our parents' age swayed like they'd earned the right not to care how it looked. Olivia sat beside me, hands folded in her lap. "People stare," I said without thinking. She glanced at me. "At what?" "At us," I said. "Like I'm your kid taking you out for air." She didn't flinch. She nodded. "Greg used to make jokes like that," she said. "At first. And later?" I asked. "Later he believed them." She looked ahead, not at me. "I don't want to shrink again." The band shifted into a slower tune. Without asking, Olivia reached for my hand. It wasn't romantic in the way movies sell it. It was steady. Grounding. Like a handrail on unfamiliar stairs. My chest tightened. Part of me wanted to pull away, not because it felt wrong but because it felt real. And real things can be taken. "If this gets worse," she said softly, "we'll figure it out. Together." That word hit harder than any threat. Together means shared consequences. Together means staying when it's inconvenient. We walked back in silence. At the building, she stopped on the stairs, the hallway light catching her face in a way that made her look tired and strong at the same time. "I don't expect anything from you," she said. "I just don't want to pretend nothing's happening." I looked at her and realized something I hadn't let myself think yet. She didn't just remind me of what I'd lost. She reminded me that I could still choose differently. I leaned in. The kiss was brief, careful. More promise than action. My mind flashed to Emily for a second, and then didn't. That scared me almost as much as it relieved me. A voice cleared behind us. "Mr. Bennett." I turned. The insurance inspector stood a few steps down, folder under his arm, eyes flicking between us. "We'll need to discuss some additional concerns," he said. "Possibly involving personal relationships connected to the property." Olivia's fingers tightened around mine. In her eyes I saw fear, not of him but of what this could cost me. And in that moment, another choice settled in my gut. Protect myself by pushing her away, or stand still and let the truth take its chances, even if it meant everything I'd built could be questioned next. The meeting room smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. That was the first thing I noticed, which tells you how badly my nerves were misfiring. When you're about to hear something that could rearrange your life, your brain clings to stupid details. I sat at the end of the table with my hands folded, staring at a knot in the wood, thinking about how many times I'd already accepted punishment for something no one had formally accused me of. Across from me sat two insurance representatives and a man I hadn't expected to see there, at least not officially. Greg. He wore the same calm expression he always did, like this was just another professional inconvenience. "We appreciate you coming in, Mr. Bennett," one of the representatives said. "This won't take long." That's another sentence you should never trust. They laid it out plainly. Concerns about prior electrical work. questions about responsibility, suggestions that cooperation now could simplify outcomes later. Translation: accept a portion of the blame, pay quietly, and everyone walks away satisfied. Everyone except the person who has to live with it. I listened. I nodded. I felt the old reflex kick in, the one that says, you deserve this. Don't make trouble. Just carry it. That was the choice forming in my chest. Sign whatever they slid across the table and keep my life small, or finally question the story I'd been telling myself for 3 years. Greg leaned back in his chair. This doesn't have to get messy, he said, like he was offering advice. People make mistakes. Owning them is the adult thing. I looked at him and realized something quietly important. He wasn't here to help the insurance company. He was here to make sure Olivia stayed unsure of herself. Right as one of the reps reached for a folder, the door opened. Olivia stepped inside. No hesitation. No apology for interrupting. She held a stack of papers against her chest the way some people hold on to truth when they're afraid it might be taken from them. I asked to speak, she said. And I will. The room went still. She laid the papers on the table. Old inspection reports. Emails. Notices from before I ever owned the building. These show documented wiring issues predating the fire, she said, her voice steady. And correspondence indicating they were deferred for cost reasons. One of the representatives frowned. Where did you get these? From the prior owner's records, she replied. Which you already had access to. Greg shifted. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. You're overstepping, he said quietly. Olivia turned to him. You don't get to tell me that anymore. She looked at the others. Mark didn't cause that fire. You know that. You just needed someone cheaper to blame. Silence. The kind that tells you the truth landed exactly where it was supposed to. The tone changed after that. Careful questions. Muted apologies. The phrase insufficient causal link was used more than once. By the end, the accusation of negligence was withdrawn. No admission of guilt from them. No apology. But the weight lifted anyway. Greg followed Olivia into the hallway. I stayed back, listening without trying to. Is this really how you want to spend the rest of your life? He asked her. She answered without looking at him. With someone who doesn't disappear when things get hard. When she came back to me, her eyes were tired but clear. Outside, we didn't speak right away. The sun was setting. Traffic hummed. Life went on, indifferent to personal verdicts. I almost signed, I told her. I know, she said. You've been carrying guilt like it was a duty. That night, we sat on the stairs between our apartments. Neutral ground. The place where everything had started. I told her about Emily in full. Not the short version. The real one. How I'd confused responsibility with punishment. How I'd been afraid that letting myself feel anything new would mean betraying something old. Olivia listened, her shoulder against mine. I avoided you too, she said finally. Because you reminded me of everything I still wanted and was scared to want again. We didn't rush anything after that. We didn't need to. The relief was quiet. Later, as I stood in her apartment by the window, the city lights soft outside, she rested her head against my shoulder. No promises. No grand statements. Just the weight of another person choosing to stay. I'm telling you this because some of us spend years avoiding people not because they hurt us, but because they show us where it still hurts. I thought I didn't have the right to be happy after what happened. Turns out, I didn't have the right to stay frozen either. Olivia played that same melody on the piano one last time that night. Only this time, I walked toward it instead of hiding from it.